Go to Washington and speak to Paolo von Schirach, a professor of international affairs at Bay Atlantic University, also the president of the non-profit Global Policy Institute. Paolo, always a pleasure to have you on. How much do you think this current counteroffensive will contribute towards how the war might or will end?
Well, look, it all depends, obviously, on the unknown elements that we really don't quite possibly can, quantify. We know Ukraine has been resupplied greatly. They received a great deal of the coveted hardware that they've been asking for months. The tanks, the armored personnel carriers, the long-range missiles, the long-range artillery. Soon enough, they'll have fighter planes, etc. But we also know this, that Russia has had a year now to dig in onto Ukrainian territory. So now they have the favorable condition of being the defenders, dug in with trenches, with all sorts of, strengthened positions. So it used to be said that you need a 3-to-1 advantage to be successful in an offensive. This is kind of kind of an abstract idea, but give you a sense of the fact that you need overwhelming force to defeat a well dug in defender. And this is the Russians today. And while the Russians, we always say they're poorly trained, badly run, badly managed, what have you, well, they're there. And they've been there for over a year now on Ukrainian territory. So it all depends on how successful this blunt attack by the Ukrainians is going to be. Can they break through the Russians' defenses? Can they cut off Crimea from the rest of Russia in terms of supply lines and what have you? That's the goal, it seems to me, but it's not quite clear at these early stages how successful this is going to be.
Yeah, but is it possible, Paolo, to foresee how Ukraine's Western allies may react if Ukraine's military doesn't achieve any of those objectives that you've just laid out because of that heavy weaponry you've been talking about that's been arriving in Ukraine ahead of this counteroffensive? Is it possible that apathy will set in if Ukraine's army doesn't make the advances that Kiev wants it to, of course, not necessarily from political leaders in the West, but from their citizens?
Yes, absolutely. Let's face it, the support for this war in the West is quite uneven. If you look at public opinion in places like Italy, or say even to some extent even here in the U.S., it's not quite clear to what extent public opinion say, okay, we're going to do this until the end, whatever it takes. This is what President Biden says, what the British Prime Minister, everybody that will be with the Ukrainians for as long as it takes. What, a year, 2 years, 10 years? I don't think so. So if the Ukrainians are not successful, if they cannot show significant results in terms of regained territory, there can be some rethinking. And then the party that says, well, we should negotiate. Why don't we start putting out some feelers? Why don't we get some intermediation by whoever to see if we can get the two sides at the negotiating table? Those voices are likely to get louder.
Do you see any possibility of there being an increasing feeling amongst Russians and their feelings towards Vladimir Putin's war? Because let's be in no doubt, this is one man's war, not a nation's war necessarily.
Absolutely. What we've been asking, from day one, what is, Putin's staying power? Can he do this endlessly? Can he throw into this front thousands upon thousands of young Russians who quite often have no idea what's going on, and they go to the front with, as we've heard anecdotally now, the millions of stories that these people have no idea what they're doing quite often. They're poorly armed, poorly trained, poorly equipped, and yet they go and they die and what have you. Does Putin have an endless supply of people that he can throw into this war? Is there a point in which there is some kind of resistance to his rule? I have no idea. He's run a pretty good, well-organized police state for about 20 years. So is he mostly in control of his country? I would say yes. Can there be an internal rebellion in the Kremlin? Some people who would say, this man is going to ruin us, is going to destroy our country, is going to impoverish our population and our economy and what have you. He's bad news. Let's get rid of him. We've been talking about this for months and months and months. Nothing has happened. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen later on. But again, things don't look great for Russia. To the extent that they continue to occupy pieces of Ukraine, well, they're still there. They haven't lost. They lose the moment in which they say, we're done, we're leaving, we back off, like they did in Afghanistan many, many years ago. So we're not there at all. And I don't have any sense that the Russians are, preparing for a withdrawal. Not at all.
Paolo von Schirach, thank you so much indeed, Paolo.
Thank you. Pleasure.